Hello, welcome to Truth Not Tradition Online Bible Study for August 31st, 2016. I'm Tony Samario. Coming to you from BroSal.org YouTube channel. We're going through the book of Enoch. We're going through a part called the Revolutions of the Lights, is this next section, which I find very interesting in that Enoch's being shown the importance place that the sun and the moon play in our reality. And like this last section that we went through, the storehouses, I think it's all of the same vision that the world that we now understand so scientifically in our modern era. If you think back to when Enoch is writing, if this is pre-Diluvian, what did any of these people know of the workings of the universe? What did they know of the sun coming up and going down unchangingly? How did anyone know that the lights of the heavens, let's say, were fixed and weren't simply passing by like a car driving down the road at night, where the lights look similar, but they're always changing, and you can't judge by what's gone past as to what's coming next. Patterns that became some of the earliest philosophical and even religious understandings, like the Zoroastrianism, which is where we get our astrology. This is thousands of years old. People have been interpreting the nature of the stars and the fixed movements like a pattern, like a musical pattern, like a set of data. And when you look at Enoch's perspective of how these things are in fact spiritual or guided spiritually, this is what I got from reading it this past week, is the understanding of why those things became so important to humanity at that early age. Why did they look up at the heavens and think that the story was there? Why would that make any sense to these apes that were evolving out of the earth? Why wouldn't those lights in the heavens simply be as far detached from us as the stones at the bottom of a deep, deep pool that you couldn't reach to the bottom of, right? The lagoons that are 100 feet deep, you can see the bottom very clear, but as soon as you start swimming down there, you realize you'll never get there. And so how important would those stones be to you at the bottom of that lagoon? What meaning would they have in your life? And yet the stars and the planets, so remote from ancient human beings as to be nothing more than some sort of recurring pattern in the sky, became in fact a central interpretive factor, and still remains that way, of course, with astrology. And so anyway, that's as a little bit of an intro to this part of Enoch, because we're going to face the same sort of thing we faced with storehouses: thunder and lightning and dew and rain, frost and hail, snow. We figured out in our scientific reality how these, what causes these things. We didn't find spirits and angels and storehouses. We found atomic explanations and even subatomic explanations in our modern versions. So same way we now get to look at what Enoch refers to as the book of the revolutions of the lights. At least that's his first line in this section. So try and open your minds, if you will, because again, this has that same sort of quaint sounding, irrational, mythological premise. So we just have to see if we can get anything else out of it. But there's a few things here, right in the first paragraph, I want you to notice. Okay, so the book of the revolutions of the lights of heaven, each as it is, according to their classes, according to their period of rule and their times, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months. That Uriel, the holy angel who was with me and is their leader, showed to me, and he showed me all their regulations exactly as they are for each year of the world and forever, until the new creation shall be made, which will last forever. So right in this opening paragraph, I was struck with several things, that these revolutions of the lights, each as it is according to their classes, according to their period of rule and their times. So classes, I mean, this all seems to me to fit our modern version of what we have the dwarf stars, depending on their age, right? Depending on their development as a star. And so this seems to be what's being related here, according to their classes, according to their period of rule, because we know stars burn out, and their times, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which gives me the idea of the zodiacal breakdown, the houses of the zodiac, the months that become our measurement. That Uriel, the holy angel who is with me and is their leader, showed to me. So one of these holy angels, one of the four holy angels, right? Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, and Phanuel. Uriel apparently is the leader of all the lights of heaven. He showed me all their regulations exactly as they are for each year of the world and forever until the new creation shall be made, which will last forever. So, as I'm always pointing out, Enoch's one of the few places I've ever encountered this continual confirmation that the world as we know it does not go on forever, but will be recreated at some point. And that new creation is the one that will last forever, that the creation we're in has some sort of timetable that ends and a new creation begins. And this is the first law of the lights, the light called the sun. Its rising is in the gates of heaven that are toward the east, and its setting in the western gates of heaven. And I saw 6 gates from which the sun rises, and 6 gates in which the sun sets. And the moon also rises and sets in those gates, and the leaders of the stars together with those whom they lead. There are 6 in the east and 6 in the west, all exactly in place, one next to the other, and there are many windows to the south and the north of those gates. So before we get confused in our anthropomorphized vision, just like with the storehouses, you got to open your mind to an idea of an interdimensional reality here. These gates, the east of heaven, where the sun rises and sets at the west, same with the moon. So there's 6 in each place, which you'll see very soon, because that accounts for the movement of the sun north and south of the equator that gives us our seasons, and many windows to the south and north of those gates. And these, of course, provide for the daily change in the position of the sun. And first there rises the greater light named the sun, and its disk is like the disk of heaven, and the whole of it is full of a fire which gives light and warmth. Now, people use this part of Enoch, I've noticed, in their flat earth interpretation. And they use Enoch as substantiation because of the way Enoch speaks about the earth and the stars. I think it's a mistake. I still don't know which is the bigger lie. NASA showing us a globe. Of course, the globe has been around. Globe's been around for a long time, and the projection of the world onto a globe has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And as I said, it didn't seem to be a problem for those who first projected it. It made sense to them. Then NASA goes into space, supposedly shows us pictures of all this stuff. Well, the moonwalk, the NASA, that's all come under scrutiny lately, and it's certainly clear to see that the moon looks to be a hoax, the moonwalk. Doesn't look like we put people on the moon. At least if we did, we sure did a lot of stuff that looks like fakery mixed in with it. And same thing with NASA. It's hard to tell if we got stuff up in space because plenty of what NASA's doing can be demonstrated to be fakery, and their images are all CGIs. You know, where are the delicious pictures that we should have if we have thousands of satellites in space? So I've seen some pictures that look authentic, and as I say, I'm confused, and I think that's the point of this modern world. Everything is chaos and confusion. Now we don't know whether we live on a globe or we live on a flat earth. We don't know if we've been to space or if anything's been, can even get to space. We're being fed confusion. And I don't know what the truth is. I'll tell you, I saw in watching some of this flat earth nonsense, at least what I watched was some nonsense, it showed a helium balloon going up with a camera. And it followed this balloon for over an hour all the way to about 50,000 feet. Or no, I think it was more, 60,000 feet. It was almost 12 miles up. And they were trying to show, look at the horizon is perfectly flat. Well, I can tell you it wasn't perfectly flat because I was able to pause the screen and get a flat edge across my screen, and it looks almost perfectly flat, but not completely. Right at the very edges of my screen, you can see it dip slightly on either side, so that if you put your flat edge on the very center of the screen, that edge leaves just a little bit of an angle at either end where it goes off the screen, because of course 12 miles up isn't necessarily so far on something that's 25,000 miles around. So if anything, to me, it demonstrated that it isn't perfectly flat. And the other thing that I saw as evidence, that the reason I'm bringing it up now in this part of Enoch, is because from that height, you could see the moon in the distance. And you could see that from 12 miles up, the moon, which almost looked on a level from the balloon, looked round like a disc, just like it does from the surface of the earth. Well, if the moon and the sun were discs and not balls, right? If they were shaped like a coin and not like a marble, you wouldn't get that same perspective at height. You would get a different perspective. But the moon certainly had the same looking perspective from 12 miles up as it does from the ground, meaning it looks like a disc. But this looked like a disc from a different angle, looking more directly at it, not looking up at it. And so that little bit of evidence that I was able to gather, both with the Earth not looking perfectly flat from 12 miles up, although the optical illusion this person was trying to gain was to say that it does look flat, but it's not perfectly flat because, of course, it isn't flat. It has a curve, apparently. And these discs that people want to point out, oh, see, even Enoch wrote about the sun and the moon as discs, because from our vantage point, they do look like discs. From the perspective of looking at only one plane of it, it looks like a disc. Was Enoch unaware that it's a globe? That's my question, but it's hard to tell. So anyway, I'm bringing this up to try and give some fullness to the discussion for those people that might be out there being bombarded with the flat earth evidence. I say be very careful. I think a lot of it is distraction and misrepresentation. It's misdirection to get us arguing over meaningless stuff. But yes, Enoch does refer to it as disc, but he also refers to it as coming out of gates. He refers to the wind as coming out of storehouses. He refers to the dew as having its own spirit, and its storehouse as its own angel. So I say that it's not fair to take these words and try and interpret them literally, so that if you want to interpret a flat earth by talking about Enoch's discs, well, what do you say about his gates and his angels? he has a chariot moving the disk across the heaven. I don't hear the flat earthers pointing out that there's a chariot up there drawing this thing around. So symbology, you guys. Enoch is giving us what appears to me to be a spiritual vision of what to us is quite three-dimensional and scientific, earthly, visceral, physical. Enoch's not seeing it in that way. He's not describing it. He's not getting these interpretations or these secrets that he's being made aware of at his time. So remember when this is. These are secrets to anyone in the world. Nobody knows these things are fixed, that they're not on some cycle, even if it's a long one. Even if it's 1,000-year cycle, then they'll change. The sun will rise somewhere else in 1,000 years. Well, here's Enoch already pointing out, like he said in the first paragraph, that these things would be the same until the whole length of the world, until it was made new again. Okay, so this first law of the light called the sun, its rising is in the gates of heaven that are toward the east, and its setting in the western gates of heaven. And I saw 6 gates from which the sun rises, 6 gates in which the sun sets. The moon also rises and sets in those gates. I saw 6 gates from which the sun rises, and 6 gates in which the sun sets, and the moon also rises and sets in those gates, and the leaders of the stars together with those whom they lead. There are 6 in the east and 6 in the west, all exactly in place, one next to the other, and there are many windows to the south and north of those gates. The first there rises the greater light named the sun, and its disk is like the disk of heaven, and the whole of it is full of a fire which gives light and warmth. The whole of it is full of a fire which gives light and warmth. Did they know that? Did they know that that round yellow thing in the sky was full of fire? The wind blows the chariots on which it ascends, and the sun goes down in the sky and returns through the north in order to reach the east. And it is led so that it comes to the appropriate gate and shines in the sky. In this way it rises in the first month in the large gate, namely, it rises through the 4th of those 6 gates that are towards the east. And in that 4th gate through which the sun rises in the first month, there are 12 window openings from which, whenever they are opened, flames come out. When the sun rises in heaven, it goes out through that 4th gate for 30 days. And exactly in the 4th gate, in the west of heaven, it goes down. And in those days, the day grows daily longer, and the night grows nightly shorter until the 30th morning. And on that day, the day becomes longer than the night by a double part, and the day amounts to exactly 10 parts, and the night amounts to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 4th gate, and sets in the 4th gate, and returns to the 5th gate in the east for 30 mornings. And it rises from it, and sets in the 5th gate. And then the day becomes longer by 2 parts, and the day amounts to 11 parts, and the night becomes shorter, and amounts to 7 parts. All right, so we already see how Enoch's going to go through now the way the days and nights change their length, at least at the latitude that he must be at, where he's getting this understanding. So you'll notice that now as we read this, it's this very analogous way of relating what we know as the path of the sun that brings us our season. And he's breaking it down into these, well, I'll let you listen to it because it's not all exactly the same, which I find to be part of the intricacy of his understanding. And the sun returns to the east and comes to the 6th gate and rises and sets in the 6th gate for 31 mornings because of its sign. I don't know what that sign is that makes, someone who knows astronomy might be able to fill the blanks here. I don't know astronomy very well, so I'm just taking it as a layman, seeing Enoch's relation to what we know or what I've been taught all my life. And on that day, this would be the 31st morning, I suppose. And on that day, the day becomes longer than the night, and the day becomes double the night, and the day amounts to 12 parts, and the night becomes shorter and amounts to 6 parts. And the sun rises up so that the day may grow shorter and the night longer, and the sun returns to the east and comes to the 6th gate, and rises from it and sets for 30 mornings. And when 30 mornings have been completed, the day becomes shorter by exactly 1 part, and the day amounts to 11 parts, and the night to 7 parts. And the sun goes out from the west through that 6th gate and goes to the east and rises in the 5th gate for 30 mornings, and it sets in the west again in the 5th gate in the west. And on that day, the day becomes shorter by 2 parts, and the day amounts to 10 parts, and the night to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 5th gate and sets in the 5th gate in the west, and rises in the 4th gate for 31 mornings because of its sign, and sets in the west. And on that day, the day becomes equal with the night, and is of equal length, and the night amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. And the sun rises from that gate, sets in the west, and returns to the east, rises in the 3rd gate for 30 mornings, and sets in the west in the 3rd gate. And the sun rises from that 3rd gate, and sets in the 3rd gate in the west, and returns to the east. And the sun rises in the 2nd gate in the east for 30 mornings, and likewise it sets in the 2nd gate in the west of heaven. And on that day the night amounts to 11 parts, and the day to 7 parts. And the sun rises on that day from the 2nd gate, and sets in the west in the 2nd gate, and returns to the east to the 1st gate for 31 mornings, and then sets in the west in the 1st gate. And on that day the night becomes longer, and becomes double the day, and the night amounts to exactly 12 parts, and the day to 6 parts. And with this the sun has completed the divisions of its journey, and it turns back again along these divisions of its journey, and it comes through that 1st gate for 30 mornings, and sets in the west opposite it. And on that day the night becomes shorter in length by 1 part, and amounts to 11 parts, and the day to 7 parts. And the sun returns and comes to the 2nd gate in the east, and it returns along those divisions of its journey for 30 mornings, rising and setting. And on that day the night becomes shorter in length, and the night amounts to 10 parts, and the day to 8 parts. On that day the sun rises from the 2nd gate and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises in the 3rd gate for 31 mornings, and sets in the west of the sky. And on that day the night becomes shorter and amounts to 9 parts, and the day amounts to 9 parts. And the night becomes equal with the day, and the year amounts to exactly 364 days. And the length of the day and the night, and the shortness of the day and the night, they are different because of the journey of the sun. Because of it, its journey becomes daily longer and nightly shorter. And this is the law and the journey of the sun in its return, as often as it returns. 60 times it returns and rises. That is the great eternal light, which forever and ever is named the sun. And this that rises is the great light, which is named after its appearance, as the Lord commanded. And thus it rises and sets, it neither decreases nor rests, but runs day and night in its chariot, and its light is 7 times brighter than that of the moon, but in size the two are equal. So this is his breakdown of the law of the sun that explains why the days and nights change their length, and for exactly how many days that these parts of the day and the night change their length, from being the day being double the night being double the day, and the day and the night being equal to each other, and the whole coming to 364 days. Pretty good if this was written, how many thousands of years ago. Before all these Stonehenge, all these different astronomical things in the earth that we know of that track the movements of the sun and the stars and lead to the establishment of this knowledge. If Enoch was written before the flood, we have to assume this is sort of the first reckoning of it that led to the nations following these tracks of the stars, and maybe even the reason that it was so important, that they knew that it was spiritual. They knew that it was continual and dependable. And they knew that from Enoch, apparently. And after this, I saw another law for the lesser light, named the moon. And its disk is like the disk of the sun, and the wind blows its chariot on which it rides, and in fixed measure light is given to it. And every month its rising and setting change. Every month its rising and setting change. And its days are as the days of the sun, and when its light is uniformly full, it is a seventh part the light of the sun. And thus it rises, and its first phase is towards the east. It rises on the 30th morning, and on that day it appears and becomes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th morning, together with the sun in the gate through which the sun rises. And a half, there's a parenthesis here with dots in it, which we found out in the intro to this translation, means that some portion of the sentence was unreadable. And it says, and a half. In just another part of this sentence, it's going to say, and a half of its light. Its light amounts to a seventh. So it looks like a repeat of this sentence. It would appear that this was supposed to say, and a half of its light, but we don't know. It just says, and a half blank, with a seventh part, and its entire disk is empty, without light, except for a seventh part, a 14th part of its light. And on the day that it receives a seventh part and a half of its light amounts to a seventh and a seventh part and a half. So he's describing, of course, when the moon goes new as a 14th part of its light and then comes back now with a seventh part. It sets with the sun, and when the sun rises, the moon rises with it and receives a half of one part of the light. And on that night, at the beginning of its morning, at the beginning of the moon's day, the moon sets with the sun and is dark on that night in 6 and 7 parts and a half. This is the new moon. And it rises on that day with exactly a seventh part, goes out, recedes from the rising of the sun, and becomes bright on the remainder of its days in the other 6 and 7 parts. And another journey and law I saw for it, in that according to this law it makes its monthly journey. And Uriel, the holy angel who is leader of them all, showed me everything, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me, and I wrote down their months as they are, and the appearance of their light until 15 days have been completed. In 7th parts it makes all its darkness full, and in 7th parts it makes all its light full in the east and in the west. And in certain months it changes its setting, and in certain months it follows its own individual course. In 2 months it sets with the sun in those 2 gates that are in the middle, in the 3rd and in the 4th gate. It goes out for 7 days and turns back and returns again to the gate from which the sun rises. And in that gate it makes all its light full, and it recedes from the sun, and it comes in 8 days to the 6th gate from which the sun rises. And when the sun rises from the 4th gate, the moon goes out for 7 days until it rises from the 5th gate. And again it returns in 7 days to the 4th gate, makes all its light full, recedes, and comes to the 1st gate in 8 days. And again it returns in 7 days to the 4th gate from which the sun rises. Thus I saw their positions, how the moon rose and the sun set in those days. Now, I'm sorry if this sounds a little confusing to just listen to me read, which is why I encourage people to have the Book of Enoch PDF so you can follow this. I'm just going through it for those that don't have the book, so you can hear how, Enoch's recounting this alteration of the way the moon the moon's light and the moon's flow in relation to the sun, right? It's not perfectly fixed. Again, he sees it as a law. These things have their law, but the moon also departs from the sun in these ways over these 7-day periods to give these variations. Again, the people that understand astrology will understand the scientific reality that these are pointing to. I simply want people out there to grasp the idea that if Enoch is a reliable source, as we've argued that he appears to be, then this is just evidence of some understanding from Enoch's perspective that predates all other understanding. You know, from my point of view, that's the way I see it. It's not like Enoch has anything to teach us that we haven't already learned about the way the sun and the moon go across the sky. It's more than that to me. It's like Ezekiel, you know, seeing chariots of fire around the camp that they were in, protecting him and his scribe, right? It doesn't say much about the physical attribute, but it sure does say something about the spiritual attribute. And that's all I'm trying to get across here in Enoch, is that the book of Enoch itself is a highly paranormal account of life. And it just needs to be taken with that grain of salt. To me, it would seem that in Enoch's time, things like the wind, the lightning, the thunder, the frost, the rain, the clouds, the sun, the moon, the stars were things that didn't yet have explanation. And so he's being shown a reality that would have made sense to people that, I guess, lived among spirits and weren't yet searching for the scientific explanation. But, you know, that would have made sense to them. Certain molecules, certain chemicals, right? What's that mean? Where when he says there's a spirit in it that binds the thunder to the lightning. Oh, okay, to people that are spiritual, it says something, I suppose. And so that's what I'm trying to get out of Enoch, you guys, is, you know, this is supposed to be, I would imagine, if it's authentic, this is supposed to be, you know, some pretty progressive information to the reality of this world that they see. And the reality seems to be that there's spirits behind these movements, and these movements are programmed, they're purposeful, they're a pattern, they're meaningful in their consistency. I mean, that's all I really get out of it. So, I just feel, you know, there's some things in here that maybe little bits of information that we don't want to just skip over. So anyway, but I am trying to get through this for people so that we can move on to the things that I know people are more excited to learn out of the book of Enoch, or study about the parables and the prophecies and such. But anyway, I find this interesting for myself, and I hope you do too. So here he goes now, off onto another tangent that I don't understand so well, but let me just go through it for you so that you can get a feel for the way that Enoch is interpreting these things, the message he's getting about it, right? Sun and the moon are being drawn by the wind. Remember, the wind's got its own spirit. So, and in their storehouses, and they come out for their, you know, on purpose. So for me, it shows a purposefulness. These aren't mechanical accidents, is what Enoch's saying. The Lord of Spirits is the one who's controlling everything. Okay, so now this is interesting. So what we finished, thus I saw their positions, how the moon rose and the sun set in those days. And if 5 years are added together, the sun has an excess of 30 days. For each year of the 5 years, there are 364 days. And the excess of the sun and the stars comes to 6 days. In 5 years, with 6 days each, they have an excess of 30 days, and the moon falls behind the sun, and the stars by 30 days. Now, I don't know what that means. And I'm not sure what excess he's taught, what movements are not in sync, that the sun has an excess of 30 days, right? The sun and the stars, as opposed to the moon, I suppose. This is what you're going to see here. And the moon falls behind the sun and the stars by 30 days in 5 years. And the moon conducts the years exactly, all of them according to their eternal positions. They are neither early nor late, even by 1 day, but change the year in exactly 364 days. That's the moon. In 3 years, there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years, 1,820 days, so that in 8 years, there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the days in 3 years come to 1062, and in 5 years, it is 50 days behind. And there are 1,770 days in 5 years, so that for the moon, the days in 8 years amount to 2832. For the difference in 8 years is 80 days, and all the days that the moon is behind in 8 years are 80 dadays. Now, I don't know if that's making sense to anybody. It makes no sense to me, all right? So I'm only reading this so we can all feel that we're going through it all. Whatever Enoch's getting at here, if any of you know the astrology or can point me in the direction of it, I would love to learn it. I don't know what this is talking about, but Enoch's certainly getting some information that he feels, is insight. And the year is completed exactly in accordance with their positions and the position of the sun, in that they rise from the gates from which the sun rises and sets for 30 days. And the leaders of the 10,000s, who are in charge of the whole creation and in charge of all the stars, and also the 4 days which are added, and are not separated from their position according to the whole reckoning of the year. And these serve on the 4 days that are not counted in the reckoning of the year. Whew, and so now we got 4 days. I don't know where those come in the 3-year, 5-year, 8-year separation of the sun and stars from the moon. I just know that, Enoch seems to be getting something that is flying in his mind. I'm not getting it. The leaders of the 10,000s who are in charge of the whole creation and in charge of all the stars, and also the 4 days which are added. I don't know what that means, but he says, now we're getting these leaders of the 10,000s who are in charge of the whole creation and in charge of all the stars. So I don't know what that means, but it sounds like there's some spirit. Lord of Spirits is behind all this stuff. And these serve on the 4 days that are not counted in the reckoning of the year. And because of them, men go wrong in them. I found this interesting. Does that mean that's why our astrology screwed up? Right? That's why we have all these explanations from the stars, but we don't get it right. I'm not sure what that means, but I thought this was very interesting. This sort of cryptic idea that the 4 days which are added and are not separated according to the whole reckoning of the year, and because of them, which would seem to mean these 4 days, and these serve on the 4 days that are not counted in the reckoning of the year, and because of them, men go wrong in them. For these lights really serve in the stations of the world, one in the first gate, and one in the third gate, and one in the fourth gate, and one in the sixth gate. And the exact harmony of the world is completed in the separate 364 stations of the world. So what these are, is that why we get, 364 days and then a leap year? 365 days, and then a leap year. So is it because we're trying to make up for these days that Enoch already knew were in there? I really don't know. But again, I find that it's because it's slightly confusing that I find it more compelling. That he's seeing things that hadn't been explained yet. There was no reference point to any of this. And that somehow men go wrong because of these 4 lights that are really serving the stations of the world. Right? One in the first gate, one in the third and fourth, and one in the sixth. Right? The extreme gates of the first and sixth, and then the middle gates of the third and fourth. The sun comes out of, and the moon. For the signs and the times and the years and the days were showed to me by the angel Uriel, whom the Lord of eternal glory has placed in charge of all the lights of heaven, in heaven and in the world, so that they might rule on the face of heaven and appear over the earth, and be leaders of day and night, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the serving creatures who revolve in all the chariots of heaven. Serving creatures who revolve in all the chariots of heaven. Right? So just more of this spiritualizing these atoms, this subatomic energy that we think is all that there is, or that they claim nowadays in the material explanation is all that there is wavelengths of energy, which they've determined take some sort of observance before they react. And yet nobody wants to talk about an observer. But that seems to me to be exactly the way Enoch paints it. Not only an observer, a organizing principle, and not just an organizing principle chemically or causally, but an organizing principle of mind, of spirit. The action comes from a spirit, not strictly from the movement particles and waves. It takes a spirit to give that wave particle the direction. I mean, I don't know, that's if I had to combine the most recent knowledge of physics with perhaps the most ancient vision of Enoch, that's what seems to be happening to me. Likewise, Uriel showed to me 12 gate openings in the disk of the chariot of the sun in the sky, from which the rays of the sun come out, and from them heat comes out over the earth when they are opened at the times that are appointed for them. And there are openings for the winds and for the spirit of the dew, when they are opened at their times, opened in heaven at the ends of the earth. I saw 12 gates in heaven at the ends of the earth, from which the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the works of heaven go out in the east and in the west. And there are many window openings to the north and to the south, and each window at its appointed time sends out heat, corresponding to those gates from which the stars go out, in accordance with his command to them, and in which they set according to their number. And I saw chariots in heaven running through the region above those gates, in which the stars that never set rotate. And one is bigger than all the others, and it goes round through the whole world. And at the ends of the earth I saw 12 gates open to all the winds, from which the winds come out and blow over the earth. 3 of them open in front of heaven, and 3 in the back, and 3 to the right of heaven, and 3 on the left. And the 3 first are those toward the east, and then the 3 towards the north, and the 3 towards the south, and the 3 in the west. Through 4 of them come winds of blessing and peace, and from the other 8 come winds of punishment. When they are sent, they bring devastation to the whole earth, and to the water which is on it, and to all those who dwell upon it, and to everything that is in the water and on dry ground. Sticking with this theme. Not only do the winds come from gates, not only are they instructed by angels, not only are they driven on by spirits, but the wind that comes out of these 12 gates, through 4 of the gates, come winds of blessing and peace, from 8 winds of punishment. So I guess that means to say that 2 times the amount of wind is for punishment on the earth than for peace. Twice the wind blows to create storms and damage than winds that creates fresh breezes that keep us cool and comfortable. Again, how would anyone, why would you even, how would you know that? What does that relate to? How does anyone know you're telling the truth? The sun coming in and out through the gates to account for the movement and the changing of the length of the days. Okay, that could be a a farcical explanation that explains something we are all aware of. But, how do you prove to me that some of the wind comes for blessings and some comes for punishment? Why would you write that? Something totally unprovable, unless you wrote it because it was just a fact that you'd seen. So it adds to the reliability to me, things like this that are so confusing. They make no sense unless Enoch's simply trying to relate what he's been shown. And all it relates to me is this idea that there is purpose, that there's a spiritual essence behind it, that there's a mind moving the wavelengths of energy. And the first wind from those gates, called the east wind, comes out through the first gate, which is toward the east. The one that comes from the south brings devastation, drought, heat, and destruction. And through the second gate in the middle comes what is right. And from it come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third gate, which is toward the north, comes cold and draught. And after these, the winds toward the south come out through three gates. First through the first of the gates, which inclines toward the east, comes a hot wind. And through the middle gate, which is next to it, come pleasant fragrances and dew and rain and prosperity and life. And through the third gate, which is toward the west, come dew and rain and locusts and devastation. And after these, the winds towards the north. Blank. Another one of these little blanks where some word or phrase is missing here. And after these, the wind towards the north. Blank. From the seventh gate, which is toward the east, come dew and rain, locusts and devastation. And through the gate exactly in the middle come rain and dew and life and prosperity. And through the third gate, which is toward the west, come mist and hoarfrost and snow and rain and dew and locusts. And after these, the winds toward the west. Through the first gate, which inclines toward the north, come dew and rain and hoarfrost and cold and snow and frost. And from the middle gate come dew and rain and prosperity and blessing. And through the last gate, which is toward the south, come drought and devastation, burning and destruction. And thus the 12 gates of the 4 quarters of heaven are complete. And all their laws and all their punishments and all their benefits I have shown to you, my son Methuselah. So pretty easy to see the symmetry there. 4 gates, north, south, east, and west. 3 in each of the 4 locations. 3 gates to the north, 3 gates to the south, 3 gates to the east, 3 gates to the west. And out of the center gate comes the blessing. And out of the 2 on either side, the east and the west of the north-south gates, and the north and the south of the east-west gates, through those other 8 come the punishments. So that's how that all works, supposedly. They called the first quarter eastern because it is the first, and they call the second the south because there the Most High descends, and there especially the one who is blessed forever descends. And the western quarter is called waning because there all the lights of heaven wane and go out, and the 4th quarter, named the north, is divided into 3 parts. And the first of them is the dwelling place for men, and the second contains seas of water and the deeps, and the forests and rivers and darkness and mist. And the third part contains the garden of righteousness. And remember, we ended the storehouse one that these were toward the garden of righteousness. So again, very confusing to me, but it brings up a lot of this occult vision of the breakdown, the way they've got all the duality separated, and then they've got the duality broken down into then their quadrants, and then those quadrants then broken down again. This seems to be very consistent with the way Enoch sees the world, right? The first quarter is the eastern, because it's the first. They call the second one the south. So each has its own name. It's not just north, south, east, and west quadrant. The eastern quadrant is the first quadrant. The southern quadrant is the second quadrant. The third quadrant's the western quadrant, and the fourth is the north. That's the fourth quadrant, divided into three parts, and it seems to be only the north quadrant that has dwelling places for men and for the sea, the deeps, the forests, the rivers, the darkness, and the midst. And the third contains the garden of righteousness. That's all in this fourth quadrant, this fourth quarter to the north. What about those other three quadrants? What's in them? Right? So, this isn't so easy to just interpret, I don't think. I don't even think it's meant for that. I don't think we have the perspective to know what Enoch's talking about, which is why all we can see from it is the intricate nature in which what we call physical reality is being reckoned by the Lord of Spirits, if this is any kind of a, reliable vision of it. And to me, what it says is a plan. There's nothing left to chance. Good and evil, left and right, up and down. The devil and all the angels, all made by God for a reason. All reconciled in a wholeness that we don't often look at in its wholeness. We look at good, we look at evil, we look at God, we look at Lucifer, we look at Jesus, we look at right and wrong in and of themselves. But when I read Enoch, I see some sort of bigger tapestry being laid out, in which things that we can't even imagine in our physical reality are presented to us as all part of the trip. These four quadrants. What's in these other three quadrants? What's with all these places of abode for the soul? What are these spirits that are in the dew and the hoarfrost and the wind and the thunder? Why is it all so purposeful, according to Enoch? Anyway, that's what I get out of it. I saw 7 high mountains, which were higher than all the other mountains on the earth, and from them snow comes. And days and time and years pass away and go by. I saw 7 rivers on the earth, larger than all the other rivers. One of them comes from the east and pours out its waters into the great sea. And 2 of them come from the north to the sea, pour out their water into the Erythraean Sea in the east. And the remaining 4 flow out on the side of the north to their seas, 2 to the Erythraean Sea, and 2 into the Great Sea, and they discharge themselves there, and not into the wilderness, as some say. I saw 7 large islands in the sea and on the land, 2 on the land and 5 in the Great Sea. The names of the sun are as follows. The first, Orieres, and the second, Tamases. The moon has 4 names. The first is Asonia, and the second Ebla, and the third Benassi, and the fourth Irae. These are the 2 great lights. Their disk is like the disk of heaven, and in size the 2 are equal. Now, all this is just so random, isn't it? And I say, I don't know that this even goes in this place in it all. This isn't just some random stuff that's been attributed to Enoch that just shows up and it's been put in this order. Maybe even a long time ago, which is why the translator kept it in this order. But it doesn't make any sense to me the way he now breaks into this about the 7 mountains. This all just seems like random sort of details. Oh, by the way, there's 7 mountains on the earth, higher than all the other ones. This is where the snow comes from. There's 7 rivers on the earth, larger than the other ones, and they all flow out into these seas. They don't flow into the wilderness, as some say. 7 islands, 2 of them are on the land. How do you have islands on the land? And 5 in the great sea. The names of the sun are as follows: 2 names for the sun, 4 names for the moon. Just all these sort of random details that are just sort of like factoids. Tells them the 2 great lights. Here's the 2 names of the sun and the 4 of the moon. These are the 2 great lights. Their disk is like the disk of heaven, and in size the 2 are equal. Interesting how he's compared it twice, the disk of heaven. I don't know what that's supposed to mean either. Doesn't, disk of heaven, whether the earth is flat, whether the earth has a dome over it, whether the earth is a globe, whether heaven is in space, whether heaven's in another dimension. I don't get the disk idea. Doesn't make any sense to me. But this is what Enoch's telling us. In the disk of the sun, there's 7 parts of light which are added to it more than to the moon. And in fixed measure, light is transferred to the moon until a 7th part of the sun is exhausted. And they set, go into the gates of the west, go round through the north, and rise through the gates of the east on the face of heaven. And when the moon rises, it appears in the sky and has a half of a 7th part of light. And on the 14th day, it makes all its light full. And the 15 parts of light are transferred to it, until on the 15th day its light is full, according to the sign of the year, and amounts to 15 parts. And the moon comes into being by halves of a 7th part. And in its waning on the first day it decreases to 14 parts of its light, and on the 2nd to 13 parts, and on the 3rd to 12, on the 4th to 11, and so on. And all the light that remains from the total disappears on the 15th day. And in certain months the moon has 29 days, and once 28. Right? How'd anybody know that? And Uriel showed me another law. When light is transferred to the moon, and on which side it is transferred from the sun, all the time that the moon is increasing in its light, it transfers as it becomes opposite the sun, until in 14 days its light is full in the sky, and when it is ablaze, its light is full in the sky. And on the first day it is called the new moon, for on that day daylight rises on it. And its light becomes full exactly on the day that as the sun goes down in the west, it rises from the east for the night. And the moon shines for the whole night until the sun rises opposite it, and the moon is seen opposite the sun. Right? So there's your full moon happens when the sun is on the opposite side, just going down as the moon is coming up in the east, the sun's going down in the west, and now the moon stays full all night and starts to go down as the sun comes up. And on the side on which the light of the moon appears, there again it wanes until all its light disappears and the days of the moon end, and its disk remains empty without light. And for 3 months, at its proper time, it achieves 30 days, and for 3 months it achieves 29 days, during which it completes its waning. In the first period, in the first gate, 127 days. And in the time of its rising, for 3 months it appears in each month for 30 days. And for 3 months it appears in each month with 29 days. By night, for 20 days each time, it looks like a man. And by day, like heaven, for there is nothing else in it except its light. And now, my son Methuselah, I have shown you everything, and the whole law of the stars of heaven is complete. And he showed me the whole law for these, for every day, and for every time, and for every rule, and for every year, and for the end thereof, according to its command, for every month and every week. Now this appears to be Methuselah talking, and he showed me. And now my son Methuselah, Enoch speaking to Methuselah, and he showed me the whole law for these. Now, do we have every word he's written? That's the other thing. Are there a bunch of this parts that give more detail that we don't have? We don't know, but he tells us, my son Methuselah, I've shown you everything. And the whole law of the stars of heaven is complete. And he showed me the whole law for these, for every day, for every time, for every rule, for every year, and for the end thereof, according to its command, for every month and every week, and the waning of the moon, which occurs in the sixth gate. For in that sixth gate its light becomes full, and after that it is the beginning of the month. And the waning, which occurs in the first gate at its proper time, until 127 days are complete, or by weeks, 25 weeks and 2 days. And how it falls behind the sun according to the law of the stars by exactly 5 days in one period of time, when it has completed the pathway you have seen. Such is the appearance and likeness of every light which Uriel, the great angel who is their leader, showed to me. And in those days Uriel answered me and said to me, Behold, I have shown you everything, O Enoch, and I have revealed everything to you, so that you may see this sun and this moon, and those who lead the stars of heaven, and all those who turn them, their tasks and their times and their rising. But in the days of the sinners, the years will become shorter, and their seed will be late on their land and on their fields, and all things on the earth will change, and it will not appear at their proper time. And the rain will be withheld, and heaven will retain it. Remember, it says the two witnesses will be able to shut up the clouds so it doesn't rain. I don't know if that's the same reference here, but that's something we have from Revelation. The rain will be withheld. And in those times the fruits of the earth will be late and will not grow at their proper time, and the fruits of the trees will be withheld at their proper time. Now I'm seeing famine. I'm seeing this brought on by the two witnesses. I'm seeing them being called terrorists, causing famine in the land. And the moon will change its customary practice and will not appear at its proper time. But in those days it will appear in heaven, come on top of a large chariot in the west, and shine with more than normal brightness. Now, I'm not sure when those days are. When are we talking about? And many heads of the stars in command will go astray, and these will change their courses, and their activities will not appear at the times that have been prescribed for them. And the entire law of the stars will be closed to the sinners, and the thoughts of those who dwell upon the earth will go astray over them. The thoughts of those will go astray over them, and they will turn from all their ways and will go astray and will think them gods. So again, I don't know if we're talking about times to come or the times that have already come. These angels that have fallen from heaven. Maybe this is all, pre-Diluvian, back to the pre-Diluvian account of what the flood's going to, the moon will change its customary practice, shine with more than normal brightness. Many heads of the stars in command will go astray, and these will change their courses and their activities and will not appear at the times they've been prescribed, meaning the stars, I'm assuming. We get this word, third of the stars of heaven fell, and the entire law of the stars will be closed to the sinners. Now, these sinners could simply be these fallen angels at this point. I don't know. And the thoughts of those who dwell upon the earth will go astray over them. Who's the them? The stars? Who's the stars? We've been told it's these angels, heads of the stars in command. And the thoughts of those who dwell upon the earth will go astray over them, and they will turn from all their ways and will go astray, and they will think them gods. Now, we've also got that coming up nowadays where we're expecting contact, right? I wouldn't doubt if what they've got planning for these people in this final deception is to point out that, these aliens are coming from these different stars, that these different stars represent gods, planets that house other creations. I'm not sure, but here you are in Enoch telling us they'll go astray from all their ways and think them gods, and many evils will overtake them, and punishment will come upon them to destroy them all. Again, I keep flashing back between, is this pre-diluvian, destroy them all? Or is this coming at the end, destroy all these people that believe in these stars that have become gods? And he said to me, O Enoch, look at the book of the tablets of heaven and read what is written upon them and note every individual fact. And I looked at everything that was written, and I noted everything. And I read the book and everything that was written in it, all the deeds of men, and all the children of flesh who will be upon the earth for all the generations of eternity. And then I immediately blessed the Lord, the eternal King of glory, in that he has made all the works of the world. And I praised the Lord because of his patience, and I blessed him on account of the sons of Adam. And at that time I said, blessed is the man who dies righteous and good, concerning whom no book of iniquity has been written, and against whom no guilt has been found. Okay, so I find this an interesting way that Enoch wraps up this book about the revolution of the lights. He said to me, O Enoch, look at the book of the tablets of heaven. And again, where was it written? Is this part of this same revolution of the lights? Or is all this part of some other section that's been put here, right? Where he talks about the, in those days, when the moon's going to change its course and shine brighter than normal, and the stars won't come out at their proper time, fruits be withheld, right? Where this whole thing is focusing on this strange period of time, and many will, it says, and the entire law of the stars will be closed to the sinners, and the thoughts of those who dwell upon the earth will go astray over them, and they will turn from all their ways and will go astray and will think them gods. It makes me think of our time when the law of the stars has been lost to us, right? Probably for thousands of years. And we've gone astray and think them gods, and many evils will overtake them, and punishment will come upon them to destroy them all. And he said to me, O Enoch, look at the book of the tablets of heaven, read what's written upon them, and note every individual fact. This is what I think is so interesting, you guys. Note every individual fact. So I looked at everything, and I noted everything. And I read the book, and everything that was written in it, and all the deeds of men, and all the children of flesh who will be upon the earth, for all the generations of eternity. And then I immediately blessed the Lord, the eternal King of glory, in that he has made all the works of the world. And I praised the Lord because of his patience, and I blessed him on account of the sons of Adam. Now, forgive me if this doesn't again sound like when Paul says all will be saved, when Paul says he died for all, when God says I'll redeem all in the Old Testament. There's plenty of places in the scripture where it seems like we want to say, hey, wait, you don't mean all, you mean all the righteous. Hey, wait a minute, you don't mean all, you mean all the chosen. Hey, you don't mean all, you mean all the believers. And yet somehow in the scripture, there's all these spots where it seems to mistakenly point to all, as in everybody. And this is another one of those spots for me. Right after seeing that people would go astray, punishment would come on them to overtake these people, and evil, right? Many evils will overtake them, and punishment will come on them to destroy them all. And he tells Enoch, make sure you look at the tablets of heaven, read what's written on them, and note every individual fact. And right after Enoch does, what does he do? I immediately blessed the Lord, the eternal King of glory, in that he has made all the works of the world. Not all the good works, not all the righteous works, not all the works of light and blessing. He has made all the works of the world. And I praise the Lord because of his patience, not his judgment, not his righteous judgment, not his condemnation, not his righteous salvation for the few that made it. Would have been a great place to confirm all that, you know. I praise the Lord because of his patience. And I blessed him on account of the sons of Adam, right? Which would be all humanity, the sons of Adam. Not just the righteous sons, not just the believers, not just the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which he wouldn't have known at this point, the sons of Adam. And at that time I said, blessed is the man who dies righteous and good, concerning whom no book of iniquity has been written, and against whom no guilt has been found. So it ends with a certain distinction between righteousness and iniquity. But what's so interesting is that even after being shown that everybody's going to sort of be lost because of these stars, this moon that won't come out in the right place, these things that are going to happen, and everybody's going to worship these stars as gods. And even after all this, and then being told, look at the tablets of heaven, note every individual fact, he comes out of it, I immediately blessed the Lord, the eternal King of glory, in that he has made all the works. And I praised him because of his patience. Yeah, it's an interesting way if what you've seen is, 80, 90% of the world's just been destroyed. And just the few have been taken out of the world, like Christians imagine, and Muslims, and Jews. All these monotheists that imagine God's just after them, going to kill everybody else. Funny, I don't find that being confirmed in any of Scripture, except in certain parts. And in Enoch, maybe least of all, even though Enoch talks about the sinners being destroyed, taken away from the righteous. That's all within a context of the earth, the dimension, I believe, of the earth, because within that context you also have all these places of abode for the soul. You really see in Enoch that it's the watchers and their offspring that are dealt with harshly. The kings of the earth, perhaps, those that have authority, are dealt with harshly. The kings and the mighty men that lead people into, basically lead people to slaughter for unrighteous means. They seem to be dealt with harshly in Enoch. But you don't find all this condemnation in Enoch. And in fact, you find these weird things about praising God that he made all the works of the world. He's responsible for this. So I'm just belaboring a little because I want pretty soon here in my own production to get into I want to start producing the metaphysics of love. I want to start producing a metaphysical account for the reconciliation of God. How is it God could have created the devil and created evil and allowed for sin and is still going to be praised for being patient? We're all going to be so happy that he made this world and everything in it. How can that be if he's going to slaughter 90% of everybody I've ever known, especially all my friends that don't know Jesus? They're just going to be burning in hell forever, but I'm going to be like Enoch, so happy about it all. Thank you, Lord. What an amazing God you are. What a perfect, look at your patience and everything you made in the world. How perfect it all is. How thrilled I am to be part of all this. See, Christians are just such bigoted, hypocritical, brain-dead people, like most monotheistic fundamentalists, that they think that's how happy they're going to be when they see everybody else destroyed. Because that's all God wants to do is take their little hypocritical butts to heaven, to Club Med. Oh, you praise Jesus all your life, so Don't you worry, we're going to destroy all those horrible people out there that denied Jesus, even though they acted a lot more like him than you did. So I still hope people will see the absurdity in that, and I hope people will, get something out of this Bible study, and I hope what they will get is that the only possible God, the only Jesus, exists to as the example of love. Save us through love if it's possible. If there are those that it's not possible to save, who am I to say? And if that's what the Scripture is relating to, well, then it's going to be that much harder for me to be so satisfied in the end. But I trust that, like Enoch and so many of these prophets, they've been privy to this final reconciliation of God. And they've been able to come across it and say, how incredible is your judgment, how perfect, how righteous, how merciful, how forgiving. And so I imagine that's what I'm going to say in the end. I'm going to see whoever gets destroyed and whatever that means, and see God's judgment as righteous and merciful. And I can only imagine that it can't possibly be anything like the Christian judgment, which is neither merciful nor righteous, nor forgiving, nor even humble. So anyway, thanks for being here in the Bible study and sticking with this book of Enoch. Let me see, next week we are on to Enoch's letter to Methuselah, which is actually very short. And then the law of the stars, which gets us back into the astronomy and all those calculations, which is also short and very interesting. And then we start getting into his visions and prophecies. So another couple of weeks maybe, but I'm still finding all of this stuff enlightening to me. And I'm glad for those of you that are sticking with it. I hope that, as I say, the one thing you get out of the Bible study is we need to love each other. That's what eternal life is, not just saying the name of Jesus over and over. He said, if you love me, you'll follow me. And so that's what we're trying to do. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you all next week.